It is 6 o'clock and you are now live.
Bonnie, call to order the Common Council Finance and Human Resource Committee meeting. Roll call. Councilmember John Rafter,
Here.
Councilmember Scott Harrington,
Here.
Councilmember Mark Davies.
Here.
Would also like to acknowledge that Mayor Gary Herzig is here. Interim Police Chief Chris Wittenberg is here with us. Financial Officer Virginia Lee is with us, along with our outstanding Personnel Director Katie Bettner. So, oh, and I see Judy Pangman's with us too. Hi, Judy. And Joe is not going to show his face tonight. So, find the what was the Wizard of Oz? The wall.
Curtain, wasn't it?
Curtain. That's it. All right. Is there any corrections to last meeting's minutes? I see a couple heads shaking now. John, were you good with them?
Yes.
Hearing none, we'll accept the minutes as provided. First item tonight is the code enforcement fees. Ginny, would you like to bring us up to date on what you're thinking there?
Hi, sorry. Hello, everyone. As we've discussed at past meetings and also during the budget process, the Code Enforcement Office would like to bring on part-time staff to take care of the code services for enforcement for snow removal, trash removal, lawn mowing, things like that. We've got this part-time staff is in process of being established. We've got the equipment now on hand for them to use. And now what we need to do is get the fees in place for what we're going to charge for it. Currently, what we do is cost plus 50%. It takes a lot of work to compute what we have to bill each homeowner. They base it on the frontage, they base it on square foot, they base it on time and materials, different fees. Every bill is different, and it's quite a time-consuming process for the Code Enforcement Office. On top of that, we also have to get certified payrolls because it's being work done for public service by the vendor. They have to submit certified payrolls to purchasing. All of that paperwork has to get reconciled. It really is a tremendous time-consuming process. What we would like to do is simplify it, have in-house staff do it, or be under the full control of the code enforcement officer. That way he's got full control of when they go out, where they go, and the assignments that they're given. We would like to establish a fee. Greg did some calculations based on FEMA equipment and the labor that would be involved. I reviewed the computations that he came up with and agreed with them, and we rounded it up to $125 per hour. We would like to have a minimum. So if you're there 5 minutes or if you're there 60 minutes, it's $125. That would make it very easy and simple. And quite often, most of the code enforcement visits are completed within an hour's time. It's very seldom that they go over an hour. So for the occasions when they do go over an hour, we would like to extend that $125 to be per hour after the minimum charge.
To the committee members, any questions?
No.
Go ahead, Mark.
So Ginny, typically, I mean, so these visits, we'll say that can range from 5 minutes to an hour. Or I mean, what's the typical length that the code enforcement is going to have to go out to a site?
Oh, Stephen, would you mind answering that question for Mark?
He's still connecting to the audio, Ginny. He was having some trouble getting
Oh, okay.
I'm right here.
Okay. Mark, maybe could you repeat the question if you don't mind?
Sure. So I'm just trying to understand what typically is the length of time that you would take when you go to a site. Is that 5 minutes? Is that an hour? What's the typical average? I recognize that every case is perhaps a little different, but what is the average?
So the way it works now, I mean, the number of sidewalks we do vary between, I would say you could probably do them in 15 minutes to, an hour. The problem you hit with that though, is you then have to figure in like the travel time to go from job to job, unload equipment. I mean, it gets really difficult to plan down to like, this sidewalk takes 15 minutes. This one takes 4 minutes. I mean, when you're figuring in like the actual process of driving to and from, unloading equipment, moving the snow, putting down the salt. I mean, we just figured that an hour was the easiest way to like kind of bill for that. But yeah, I would say, I mean, most of our sidewalks in the city, if you're doing the job in a timely fashion, they don't exceed an hour of time, that's why the easiest billing rate was for 1 hour of work.
Right. And this extends to even mowing lawns for properties in the summertime, right? So this
Yep.
is kind of all extensive. Okay, good.
Yeah, and the idea is this would reduce the amount of time spent in the office because we have to calculate those invoices. So when the invoices come in, I mean, it's not just the actual process of doing the work. It's also the process of, the finance department handling them, my office, computing the total cost. I mean, there's administrative costs that exist on top of doing the work. So the easiest way to do is to say, we can bundle that all together and we can say it's 1 hour. It includes our employees to remove the snow, mow the lawn, and then the time it takes for my office to, process those bills, find the lawns that need mowed, it's kind of an all-encompassing fee.
All right. Thanks, Stephen. Thank you, Jenny.
The motion that we would need for council's consideration for approval is amending the current fee schedule that we have. Right now, it's listed as cost plus 50%, and what we would like to do is modify it to say 125 plus 125 per hour after the minimum.
So I guess my question is to Stephen. When I read this, the first thing that came to my mind is I've been working with a Korean War veteran on High Street, and I know that due to some medical reasons, he was unable to get out there and shovel here recently. And I know that the city came and I think he received a bill for, I think it was $50 or $75, but for the sidewalk. Is there going to be any consideration, any thought process to try and, $125 on someone that's on a fixed income, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, there's an appeal process. I mean, as a normal human being, I understand. I mean, I obviously do not enjoy going out and shoveling everyone's sidewalk and sending them a bill. And, we have lots of people that we end up shoveling that have all kinds of circumstances. And unfortunately, I'm just tasked with removing the snow. But we do have an appeals process, which goes in front of a board of citizens who, review these bills and provide relief when they feel it's necessary. And that's honestly, that's the best answer I have.
Okay. Thank you. Scott?
I'm all right with the initial show up at 125. By the time you load the truck, you get people there and stuff. I'm just a little uncomfortable with, you're already up there and say you're only there for another 15 minutes that we're going to hit you another $125. I think, that's a little rough. I know we're trying to make a statement, but on the same token, when you're starting to talk about sometimes people are struggling stuff, I just have a problem with hammering another 125 for another hour when you're already there for the first hour. If it's only going to take another 15 minutes, I would think maybe there should be a half hour breakout in there somewhere. I understand they're trying to streamline things. I get that, but I think there's got to be a little bit of area there.
So yeah, I mean, that is part of it. Unfortunately, what we're seeing in that bill represents the office time, the finance department staff, the code enforcement office staff, the city employee who's actually doing the snow removals, the cost of the equipment, the cost of the salt. We're not hiring a contractor. I mean, if we don't use a contractor, we now have to take into account all those costs that we didn't have to use, that we didn't have to bill for before. I mean, written into the appeal process, a homeowner can show financial hardship, and the board does have the ability to adjust the final cost or the final invoice to the homeowner. So right now, if someone comes and appeals those bills and they're denied, the city eats the cost and we have no control over it. Right now, because if we were to adopt this, the city employee, that cost is us. We're paying that person. We're no longer paying a contractor whatever rate they bill us at. So we do have a little more control over the cost, and therefore we could have a little more, I would say, leeway in our ability to, adjust some of those costs during the appeal process.
Aren't you working on a computer program too? Isn't this part of the computer program where you could streamline it with the computer program, and that you pull up and you mark you're there, you mark the time you're out, and it should adjust the billing for you?
What we have the ability to do is we can mark where jobs need to be done, and we can mark when those jobs were completed. If we want to try to break down all of those costs by the minute, I think you're creating work. I mean, the time it takes to sit down and calculate all those invoices then has to be figured into the cost of the service.
Right. But I thought you guys were going towards a computer program.
Right. We are.
So you couldn't put the computer program in the vehicle, and then they come in and it downloads and it automatically loads into the computer program what everything is? I'm not asking for an itemized statement, Steve. I'm asking why, for a half hour increment. I don't think that's that much labor. If the computer program can do it, I don't think that's
So I mean, we could do that. I mean, I guess part of the issue then becomes, is the city operating a snow removal company that operates at a discount to what a private company would charge to do the same work? I mean, I don't want to create a situation where we're billing 5 minutes for a job and that person gets a $10 bill to remove snow, and the city becomes the private snow removal contractor for everyone that doesn't want to shovel their sidewalk.
Well, if you're going to do that, Steve, I pay $30 to hire a company to come do my rental property. We're charging $125 to show up.
Can I jump in here for a second? Scott, is your question, you're fine with the minimum of 125? What your question is after the first hour?
Yeah.
So Stephen, I think what Scott is asking is if instead of charging $125 for the second hour, that we would charge an increment of 30 minutes instead of 60 minutes if the crew was in turn not there for the full hour, for the full second hour.
I mean, I'm fine with that because none of these jobs will take more than an hour.
Good. Yeah, because Steve, I was the same way. That the first hour, I guess I could see the 125, but the second hour. So thank you for looking at it a little bit different. So I appreciate that. John, you had something you wanted to add?
No.
So we're gonna go with 125 for the first hour. And then if they go into the second hour, it's billed on the half hour. Is everybody good with that?
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Scott, Mark? Okay. Gary, go ahead.
Sorry. Stephen and Ginny, just before we put it on the agenda, can I assume you've run this by David Merzig, or if you haven't, please do?
Yes, I talked to David directly.
Okay, good, thank you.
And also, just so you know, I also talked to our insurance agent.
All right, so the next item up is the budget transfers.
Relating to code enforcement, currently, because we've had so much snow, and we don't have a part-time staff established right at the moment, the budget that we had for 2020 has already been exceeded for the contractor. I think his bill is now up to about $8,000. So I'm asking for I have 9 here, but some more bills came in today, so I'm going to modify my request to be 10,000 to cover us, hopefully, for the bills that are going to be coming in. And I'd like to transfer it from the part-time budget for right now into the contracted services, but just be aware that I will probably be coming back again depending on how much more snow comes in before we get our part-time staffers on board.
Understand. To the committee members, anyone have an objection to the transfer of the hearing none, seeing
No.
none? Okay, Jenny, on to the water sources.
Yeah, the
supplies.
water source, as you know, the Catella well has been being cleaned. And is Greg with us? So Greg, please correct me if I say anything incorrectly here. And when they were working on the well, they found that the motor of the pump in Catella well was in need of repair. They tried to repair it and found that it was not possible to repair. So we need to replace the motor of the pump, and that's going to be almost $16,000. And this was not anticipated in the budget. So what we would like to do is request that we transfer the $15,495 from the purification purchase services to the source of supply purchase services.
And later on in 21, Jenny, what do we have coming out of that line item that we're going to have to revisit?
Well, that's really going to be more for a Greg decision. They are trying to keep a very close eye on what they're spending. You never know with the water department, especially when there's water breaks or if they have another pump that goes. Greg, would you like to add to that as far as what you think in the future we may be having to adjust?
I can't say specifically, Len. I spoke to Stan Schaefer, water treatment plant chief operator, about where we could take some money from for this purpose. And the reason we suggested F8330-464, that's the plant purchase services code. He usually has a little extra in there for some basically anticipating issues that come up throughout the year that aren't necessarily improvements, but more repairs, so there's unanticipated issues kind of budgeted in because we know we have a certain number of those every year.
Mhm.
So that's really what this money is taking away from. Of course, if an unanticipated issue comes up that requires, additional funds in that code, then we would have to look elsewhere, possibly to the water fund contingency. Ginny and I did discuss taking this expense out of the waterfront contingency, but I didn't want to do that because I don't want to I want to be as conservative as possible in this first 6 months, try to keep that contingency available if we can.
And Jenny, how much is it going to leave in that line item after we take this?
Let me take a look. Currently, we have almost 42,000 available, and if we take the 16 from it, it'll leave another 16.
John, Scott, or Mark, any questions?
I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry, I did my math wrong.
Uh-oh. How much are you going to have left over, Jenny?
Hold on. Another 26. I was off by 10.
How much are you going to have?
Another 26,000 will be available.
Okay.
The only thing I didn't hear was how much are we taking out?
We're going to take out just about 16,000.
Kind of got to be done.
Okay. Seeing no disagreement, we'll move that item up to full council. The airport, real quick, the airport was asked to have their overhead doors put into the budget this year. And so now we've got to get it all the way included into the budget. So we've got to have $1,700 to have the doors maintained Did I say that right, Jenny?
Yes, you did. And what I'd like to ask approval of is to take it from the airport's professional services
Mhm.
and transfer it to the maintenance agreements.
Any objections?
None for me.
Seeing none, hearing none. That'll move up. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
All right, Judy, I think you're up.
Yeah, on the armory. Greg, do you want to talk about the armory part of it, or?
Yeah, if I can start if you'd like. So we've had a meeting with CDBG, Homes and Community Renewal officials regarding possible eligible projects for funding this year. I think due to the deadline is March 5th. One of the projects that we've identified is an armory building needs assessment. As you know, the Armory is an old building. We own it. We have a lot of issues with it. There's, roof leaks from time to time that need to be repaired, and mortar that needs to be repointed and patched in the exterior. There's asbestos abatement, lead paint issues, all sorts of issues with an aging building that ultimately will need to be addressed, and some higher dollar items that we've kind of been pushing off and just doing the bare minimum maintenance every year on this building. So knowing there aren't a lot of funding sources for this type of thing, it's not a big revenue maker. Certainly it's losing money every year. Expenses exceed revenues. The revenues we do get are from renting out the gymnasium, the teen center. Occasionally we get people, groups interested in renting out some other spaces. But for the most part, it's underutilized. So what a needs assessment would do would identify all the physical issues, also including ADA accessibility, which is a little bit lacking now, if we'd like to bring it up to current standards. And I think that's really the first step. Once we do that, which we could accomplish if we got this grant for up to $50,000 with a 5% match, I'm reaching out to an architect now to work with them to come up with a budget for what it would take to do the needs assessment. It might not be a full $50,000, but we'll know that before the application goes in. And I think that match could come out of existing city funds, probably the engineering professional services budget for this year if we did get the grant. And so if we were able to get that, do the needs assessment, that could lead to future CDBG funding for ADA accessibility improvements for the actual construction of those. And potentially we've talked with TOMA about, and maybe Judy, you want to jump in here with some other grant funding that could be available down the line. But first step is to get that needs assessment.
Judy,
Yeah, so because the city owns that building, it's very limited on what funding we can get to do work on the building. Not too many funding opportunities are out there for municipally owned buildings like this one. We can go for this planning grant, and later on, if we get the planning grant and get the plan in place, later on we could go for a grant for the ADA improvements, possibly a few of the other components that need improvements, depending on what the final use of the building is. It has to be like a community-wide type of use for the building or part of the building. I was just trying to think of other funding sources. There is another funding source that we might be eligible for, which is through USDA later on once we identify what the issues are. But that's typically just a loan and not a grant. So the the CDBG money that we're going after right now and later on could be grant funding, mostly for ADA improvements, possibly a few of the other improvements, but that would be determined later on.
okay. Committee members, any questions? Go ahead, Mark.
So I appreciate the needs assessment. I think that it's obviously it's a big building. I've been inside it. There's a lot of need there. But do we also have a long-term plan for this building, or is that kind of shaped into this needs assessment? Like, and I'm talking not the physical maintenance of the building, but the how we use it? Or is it kind of both physical building as well as how we use it? That's part of the needs assessment.
Yeah, that's a good question. And we've talked about that. And I'd like to make it kind of both. We can look at, as we're doing the needs assessment, what do we need to change or alter about the building that could make it more attractive to someone to rent those spaces that currently aren't being rented? Is it just physical improvements, the basic things, or is there other changes that can be done? Another outside of the box thing we've talked a little bit about is potentially partnering with a private developer to convert the use of the armory or a portion of it to some sort of private. There are issues with that we would need to sort out on our own, regardless of whether we get a needs assessment grant, which would be figuring out what exactly are we legally able to do with the building. The city purchased it, I think, for $1 from the state a while ago now, decade and a half or so, I'm not sure. But the deed says that it has to be used for recreational purposes. It doesn't specify only recreational purposes. We've used it for some other things during that time frame. And in initial conversations with the city attorney, it seems as though that it's feasible and possible to use it for other purposes. So we'd like to explore that a little more and see how far could we go with that. Could we, partner with the developer and condo a section of it out for some other use? See if we can get creative, because otherwise, I think just for recreational purposes, it's not a building that's ever going to be a moneymaker or even probably break even for the city. But there might be some other things we can do with it. As far as I know, in order to sell the building, we would have to go to the state legislature and ask for some kind of approval. I'm not sure if that's something that would be possible. So to answer your question, I would like to look at that and explore that as part of the needs assessment.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, it seems like that's a good opportunity because it's a neat building, and I just wonder how we can maximize its use and how we could maximize its potential rental opportunities, and what are the other ways to think about it. So thank you.
Welcome.
Great question, Mark. Any other questions or concerns? Is there anyone that's objecting to committing to the CDBG grant?
I think Gary has one. He's looking
Gary,
for.
you have an objection?
No objection. Greg, I don't know if it ties into the needs assessment but we also have the additional issue with any significant changes to the interior of the building require SHPO's approval. We had them here about 5 years ago when we talked about the possibility of Housing Visions using that structure for their project. And after review, they said no to that. So I don't know if it has to be brought into the needs assessment or not, but that's out there as well.
Gary, just some clarity on that. So SHPO said no, we couldn't use it for housing?
At that time, correct, they didn't want changes to the large area that is currently the gymnasium now,
Right.
where it spoke about breaking that up into apartments, and they said no to that. Again, that was 5 years ago. Times change.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Gary. And we would want to ask them that question and explore that further. But I guess the idea was potentially, and I was thinking because the deed says it has to be used for recreational purposes, is to still keep the gymnasium area, use it for the same purposes it's used now, and then divvy up the front office areas into some housing. Be kind of a unique setting, but maybe they would look at that differently. I don't know.
My understanding, Greg, and I could be wrong on that, is that to use it for other than the current purposes, it would require an act of the state legislature. Not that that can't be done, but that's what it would require. Which is the same issue. It's selling it. I think we can sell it, but we can't, if we were to sell it to be used for a purpose other than recreation, we'd run into the same thing. I think the problem revolves around, we pledged to use it for recreation only, so we'd have to get the state legislature involved.
Well, hopefully this will all shake out going through the process. So hearing no objections to the application, The next item is D, which we have to have a public hearing. Judy, was there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just explain what that's going to be or what that is. Every year that we want to put in applications for CDBG funding, we have to do a public hearing. That gives the public an opportunity to discuss the potential applications. We don't have to identify exactly what we're putting in, but the language of the notice includes, economic development, housing, planning purposes, public infrastructure, and et cetera. So we have to do that. So we're getting that done in order to be able to put this application in. I also intend, let me back up. The micro enterprise program is changed this year. It's going from being available only in the CFA on an annual basis to they're moving it out of that program, and they're going to be putting it alongside of the small business and economic development programs, which are open rounds, which means we could come in at any time. So I've talked to Rich Cunningham, our grant writer, and we're kind of targeting that we're going to probably start out by putting in one a year. And I want to allow him to get past this March 5th deadline because there's a lot of CDBG applications that they're going to be working on. But right after that, March and April, I want to start the process to go in for another micro enterprise program. And this one's going to, the way that they're doing it, it allows us to put in applications that we already have in hand or letters of intent that we've received from businesses that we're interested in funding. So we can do like a two-part type of application where we're identifying the projects that we would like to fund that we already know about, but also including an amount asking for funding to be able to do an open round so that, sometime in the year, later in the year, we would be able to offer another round for other businesses that didn't get in touch with us prior to that grant deadline or to when we put the grant in. I think it's going to open up a lot of opportunities for us to be a lot more flexible than we've been able to be in the past, and to really dig in and work on some good applications. And when people contact us, we can help them. We'll connect them with Michelle Caden at the Small Business Development Center, and she can help them work on their business training and their applications and really be ready so that when we get the funding, we've already included them and they can just hit the ground running, but also be able to offer others that aren't in that place yet, or business ideas as they come up throughout the year. We would be able to have more funding available for them. They've increased the limit up to $300,000. Right now it's at $200,000, but if we're going in on an annual basis or even more often than that, if something comes up, we probably are not going to be asking for that much. I can't imagine that we'd go for more than 200 at a time because we're going to be doubling up the admin on these, being able to go in this often on them. So I'm excited about it. I think it's a great thing. Like I said, we're going to be doing this in March or April. And we just did the round 3 of the current micro enterprise, which is the end of this round or the end of this program. We're going to be making those announcements shortly. I'll be getting you the information about them this week. And some of them we're going to be able to offer them to be able to be included in the next one if they need to have their applications a little bit more rounded out. We weren't able to fund everybody that came in because we only have a limited amount of money in this round. So that's coming up. The other thing about this is you have the citywide has to have a 51% low to moderate income limit in order, 51% or more, in order to be able to apply for a citywide program. And we're at 50.93 right now for the first time. It's good news for the city. It's bad news for funding. They don't round up. So we're waiting for new income limits or income data that's going to be coming out probably in March or April. And we're hoping it squeaks up a hair to over 51%. And if it does not, then we'll be in the situation that when we're looking at our projects, we'll have to be looking at them like neighborhood wise or target area wise, or by streets, depending on what we're doing. And then they'll require income surveys. So that's a whole different ballgame than what we've been dealing with. So we're just keeping our fingers crossed that that number goes up a hair and that we'll still be able to be eligible citywide for stuff. So.
Okay, thank you, Judy.
Yep.
The committee members or the mayor, any other thoughts or concerns? All right, hearing none, we'll also have that added on to the council agenda. Next item up is topic E, police department staffing and recruitment. You're on, Chris.
So as you all know, the police departments had what seemed like perpetual struggles regarding staffing. We were at one point at 28, authorized for 28 police officers, which has been whittled down to 25, something that I opposed vehemently for years to no avail. Mostly because of attrition and retirements, and the way that the hiring cycle works is we're never able to get up to full staff. Currently, for those of you that don't know, I am 5 down as far as lines go. That would bring us to 20, and I have 4 that are either on modified or work injury related leave. So I'm in a position where I've been depleted by 9. I have 2 pending retirements in 2022, both of whom I'm expecting to leave, with another pending retirement potentially a year after that. So that would be 3 retirements. And I believe that what we would like to try to do at this point is to get as many as we can off of this list up to 7. To try to get to the police academy, because history has shown us that we won't, very unlikely that we get them all back. But even if we do, we'll be in a position where we will be able to give the officers that are currently working a bit of a respite from the current pace of operations and activities that they're under, with the intent of looking forward to the 2 additional retirements. And planning in hopefully for that attrition.
Chief, typically the recruitment for the department happens when there's a need, right? It's not annual or ongoing.
Well, I can't remember the last time that we haven't had a need. We've run a test annually very consistently, I think, for close to the last 10 years. We are never, and I think I can say that with full confidence, at full staff. I think the last time that we had a full complement of officers was in 1999.
But by this time, you guys know what works and what doesn't work.
Well, unfortunately, last year, I think we ended up with about the same number of candidates. But our issue is this year, we have a much better, more solid group of potential police prospects, which is unheard of. So I think we want to capitalize on this as best we can to try to take advantage of the solid people that we've got so far. We had, please hold on just a second.
Future, is that our future police officer right there?
I hope not. So, I'd like to see us capitalize on this. Given the changes that we've had in bail reform and the current environment of reforms that we're looking at, the administrative burdens have become exceedingly difficult. And really at the top end, I think we need to end up increasing staff for administrative staff at some point. and I'm not saying that that's going to happen overnight, but there really needs to be a hard look at the structure of the department overall. And I think this will put us in a good position where over the next few years, we'll be able to plan for that kind of reform.
And so, thank you for coming before the committee tonight, but is there anything else that we can do as a committee to help cause for the department? That's the primary purpose of why you're here tonight.
Well, if we're looking at recruitment and retention, I think we've shown this year that we're able to at least draw candidates here. Keeping them is a different story, and I think that goes for the community as a whole. So, that said, pay and benefits is always an issue. They come up over and over in conversation with the bargaining units. It's certainly something that I think would be would increase to the attractiveness of the police department for people to be able to stay here. There is a phenomenon in Oneonta where the properties, and I'm sure you have all discussed this as well, are very expensive and a bit artificially inflated due to rental properties and baseball camps, etc. So it's difficult to get people to come in and want to live in the community. So as far as creative solutions, we've discussed tax benefits for property taxes for city employees. There's been a lot of discussion on that front. Really, these are things that the bargaining units are going to have to hone in on. I can talk to you based on what it is that I have from my 17 years as a union officer here in the city. But really what ends up happening is we end up losing officers to other agencies, including the state police, that have better pay, lesser hours, and it may be an easier workload. I think some of that would be, we might be able to stem some of that with the additional employees, because it would spread the workload out. In the staffing situation that we're currently in, even just getting additional training for the officers, ongoing training, is an issue, because we have to allocate manpower to cover absences, and that becomes difficult also. So we're really in a tight spot right now.
Right. So when does the Proby school start?
Current school is slated to start on March 27th. Today I had, Saturday we had 14 psychological pre-tests administered by the Detective Bureau, and they were hand delivered to PSP, which is our psychological testing center up in Albany. They were hand delivered today by a detective and dropped off at the door, and they're hoping to be able to get those underway for Zoom meeting follow-ups by the end of the week. That said, the backgrounds are nearly closing. Detective Sergeant Tiemann said that I should have the background investigations completed and on my desk by the 15th or 16th, which should put us in a position where we can start to compare the backgrounds with the psychologicals and start making decisions to push to council.
So right now we have a solid, or at least 14 that we're willing down to, and you're going to send 7 to the school, correct?
If I can get approval from the council, that would be the ideal, is to try to get 7 into the police academy, so that we may get 7 in return, hopefully. But again, history's told us that, we may not even graduate half of them. I'm hoping that we'll be able to change that in going forward. I'm hoping that we can get 7 in and 7 out.
Ginny, do we have any hurdles to get through financially to make that happen?
Yes. Currently, the budget includes the police chief, the police lieutenant, 5 sergeants, and 18 officers. So it's a full count of 25. And Chris, if we bring on 7 more, we will be, if I'm doing the math right, we'll be 2 officers above what's in the budget. Is that correct? I think I lost Chris on that question.
Yeah, we'll be 2 above. At this point, we have 2 expected retirements coming in 2022, so we would only really be 2 above for a short period of time.
Right. So what I would need to do, Len, is put some numbers together. And as Chris said, that this would be a temporary situation. I depending on what the future brings, as far as what the department needs, would depend on, the 2022 budget. But let me put some numbers together and figure out what we would need to amend the budget by, and because it wouldn't be for a full year, it would be only from Katie. The begin date would be March 25th. Is that what Chris said as far as the school starting?
Well, it starts towards the end of the month, but typically we like to bring them on a few days in advance so we can get them, a little acclimated to the department before they go off. I just want to be clear too that, when we're talking about 7 officers, we're still very much, in the preliminary phases of, the background and the psychological evaluations that will be done by a doctor. So this is all contingent upon successful completion of those, of all of those screening requirements. So while we're hopeful that we're going to be able to recommend that many, I mean, we're not there yet.
And also, just so you know, we do have the vacancies budgeted full year. So what I would do, I just need to do some math to see how much money we haven't spent so far that we could put towards the additional 2 officers. So I just need to do some calculations and get a summary to the committee.
Sure, understandable. So if we could just maybe clear out or at least answer those questions so that the chief can and Katie can take a good look at candidates, I'd appreciate it. Any other questions from the committee members or the mayor? Scott?
I just want to remind, last year we gave then Chief Doug Brenner 1 extra position to send to the academy. We went to 4, and we only had, I think it was 1 that made it. So I really don't have a problem going over, because history has shown us that, we're going to have, at some point, we're going to have somebody that's either going to decide the job's just not for them, or they're just not going to make the requirements while they're in the academy. So, I mean, I understand where they're coming from, but I just wanted to remind everybody that we did do that, where we gave an extra position, and out of all that, we still only ended up with 1 person that made it.
Good point. Mark or John? Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, Chris, just a question. You said you have anticipated retirees in 2022. Not familiar with the system. I mean, could that be any time in 2022? Is there usually a point where officer needs to notify that they're retiring and there's a special time, or is that based on when they come in? I guess I'm just trying to understand when those dates might be. So how long we might have to carry extra officers in the budget in 2022.
So I'll just give you a quick layout as far as how this would work. If we send 7 off to the police academy, and let's say in theory they come back, we wouldn't even be able to clear them. As a matter of fact, we just had an officer that came back from Broome County Academy, and she wasn't cleared for solo assignment until the end of January. So these officers, when trained, wouldn't even be eligible for solo patrol until the first part of 2022 as it stands now. So that's something that I just wanted to lay out so that you understand what it is that we're looking at. This takes about a year for us to get them to the point where they're functional on their own. And that's at a very basic level. The officers that we've got that are looking to leave are Detective Jen Torres, who's had her date planned for quite a while. I believe that her actual 20th anniversary is June 10th, 2020 or 2022. And Officer Tara Gregory, who's would have been eligible this year, but given some family leave, would be eligible on May 26th at the latest of 2022.
Thank you.
And John, you said you had no questions, right? Okay. Gary, did you have anything? Okay. Chris, thank you very much for coming tonight. And if there's anything else that we can do as a committee to help you move this forward, please let us know. Okay.
I appreciate all of your support, and I appreciate the ability or the opportunity to come and speak in front of you regarding staffing. It's been an issue for us for a long time, and I really hope that we can see through to getting the department up to staff. So thank you very much.
Okay. Katie, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so. I think Chris adequately captured the status of staffing.
And we've completed our agenda. Is there any need to go into executive session? Wow. Is this going to set a record? Wow. Okay. Hearing no further items or topics to be discussed, I guess I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Look at all those hands go up. All right, guys. Enjoy your night.
Len,
Yes.
could you stay, is it proper for you to stay on and I talk to you about something? Or should I
Sure.
call you? Okay, if you would stay on,
Okay.
is that okay? Okay,
Probably better if you just call me, John, because I think they
yeah, I
record
thought,
this.
yeah.
Okay. Good night,
Good night,
everybody.
all.